I want to introduce you to Katharine Hayhoe, quite possibly the most famous climate scientist in the world. She's authored countless studies and reports and devoted huge amounts of her career to communicating climate change. Everything from books to late-night TV appearances. And full disclaimer, I've been a huge fan since before this channel even existed. And spoiler alert, whoever said you should never meet your heroes clearly never met Katharine Hayhoe. I had the chance to sit down with Katharine recently. We recorded one video all about how we visualize climate change, link for that at the end. But in this video, we discussed how we process the emotions of working on climate change. How does Katharine not only deal with working on this overwhelming topic, but also with the deluge of hate that comes with being one of the world's most visible climate scientists. I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And that is probably the last time I will ever say that with this backdrop, which makes me feel a little bit emotional. Okay, on with the video. So Katharine happens to be in Berlin at the same time as me, which is really lucky. I just got back yesterday, and so I thought it'd be really lovely, seeing as we've known about each other for years and years, but have never been in the same place, let alone the same bench as each other.
I know. I make my students watch his videos.
Oh, really?
Yes, I do.
Oh my god. Well, I'm very happy that's where my views are coming from, students who are being forced to watch my channel. So if you're one of Katharine's students, thank you and do your homework. But I thought since we're in the same place, it would be lovely to talk about some of our experiences around climate change and
definitely.
Our feelings, because I feel like so often as climate scientists and climate change speaky people, we're just explaining stuff all the time, which is great, and it's an honor to do that. But it's taxing as well.
Yes.
And so I wanted to talk to you, I guess maybe that's a good place to start, what it feels like to be in this position where you're not only talking about climate change, but you're perhaps one of the most visible climate scientists talking about climate change in the world. How is it for you?
That's a good question. Well, I think that as a climate scientist, which you are too, and I think you probably feel this as well, I feel even more responsibility to talk about this. So I know already that having conversations is one of the most important ways any individual can catalyze systemic change. And we need to change the system. It's not enough to reduce our personal carbon footprints. None of us can reduce our footprint to zero in the system that we live in. We need the best and the easiest choice for everyone to be the right choice. And the only way we're going to achieve that is if we completely change the way we get our energy, the way we live, the way we grow our food, and all aspects of our life in pursuit of a better future. But as climate scientists, we know more about it than most people.
But that's a big weight, though. Sometimes I feel to have that understanding and to understand the magnitude of what needs to change. I don't know, so it feels often very exciting, and I feel so honored that I get to talk about this, but sometimes I just feel like, oh geez, like, oh my gosh, it's such a gargantuan task.
It is, and I don't know about you, but sometimes it's just hard to switch off. So, for example, when I travel, and I'm traveling right now, because I'm very conscious of the carbon footprint of our travel, I try to fit in as many events as possible whenever I travel. And it's gotten to a truly insane amount of events.
This is one of the events that is being squeezed in.
It is. In addition to meetings and a lecture at the university tonight, and every day I typically have 5 or 6 different events that I do. And it can be exhausting, but I just feel very driven because I know that we don't have a lot of time. In fact, if we had started climate action a decade or 2 or 3 earlier, we'd be in a much better place. We're already behind the 8 ball, so to speak, when it comes to climate action. So the sense of urgency drives me, and it can be exhausting. And we're not running the 100-meter dash, though. This is an ultra marathon that we're on. So one of the biggest things I feel like I've been learning over the past few years, and that I try to remind myself of regularly, is that I truly believe that spending time with the people we love in the places we love, doing the things we love, is climate action. Because that's what fuels us for the fight.
I genuinely think, we can't care for the people around us, for the world around us, if we're not caring for ourselves. And that means taking care of our mental health. At the same time, a lot of people do suffer mental health consequences of thinking about climate change a lot. And I would say I'm no exception to that. I definitely have times when I feel anxious or very sad or grief around what's happening to the planet. Katherine, you seem like a relentlessly cheerful person on the outside, but I know that when you're standing this close to the fire, that can't be how you constantly feel.
No, because as scientists, we see the data. So we actually look at the data that tells us that the water off the coast of Florida is hot tub temperatures and it's killing the coral. We look at the data that shows us that almost 40% of the area burned by wildfires across Western North America was because of the emissions of, just a few dozens of companies. We know what's going to happen depending on the choices that we make, and that's the urgency that drives us to do the communication like you do all the time and like I do too. And so I think it's really important to realize that if we feel frustrated, if we feel anxious, if we feel angry, if we feel sad, those are normal, rational responses to what's happening. In fact, if we don't feel that way, I don't think we understand the problem that's confronting us and the magnitude of the solutions. But I also know that if we stay there, that's not going to change anything.
What are the things you do just in your personal life to try and grapple with those huge and often hugely negative feelings?
When things just sort of reach that level where you just can't deal with them anymore, I just get out in nature. I just spend time, and for me, typically it's being out on the water. So I grab my paddleboard and I just go out and just spend some time again in the places I love, with the people I love, reminding myself of what I love, and that's what restores your soul. And it's challenging because there's so many things that are just frustrating and enraging and angering. And as climate scientists too, it's not only what we see, it's what people say to us. So people say the most horrible things to us.
And it's worth mentioning, Katherine is huge on Twitter. Katherine is also a woman online, and I mean, those things already put, I guess, very sadly, a target on someone's back. But then throw climate change into the mix, oh my God.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
So every day I get anywhere from a few to dozens of really hateful, arrogant comments, and figuring out how to deal with those, not just the actual truly devastating impacts of climate change, but the resistance that people are putting up by attacking climate scientists, by trying to shoot the messengers, is challenging. So for a number of years, in addition to blocking, I've also just started a collection of them because I figured maybe a psychologist would like to analyze them sometime. And now, in the past few months, I thought, well, maybe turn them into some fun videos. So I've started to turn some of the comments I get into these fun videos. I think they're fun, where I just share some of them that are so ridiculous, like, if you're not going to cry, you have to laugh.
Yeah.
And when we just sort of throw those into the light and see how ridiculous they are, but then offer a really positive thought at the end, I feel like that's one of my coping mechanisms, personally.
We spoke before, actually, about online harassment for a podcast for Nature. I'll put a link somewhere in the description. But one of the tips, I guess, you gave me for dealing with this is keeping a collection of the really lovely and heartwarming comments that you get. Because while we both do get these awful comments, we do get really lovely comments from people sharing what our work means to them and how it's helped them understand things or grapple with these kinds of big feelings. And so if you're seeing this and you're thinking, oh, that's horrible, you receive such horrible messages, send a lovely message to Katherine
and Adam.
or to me.
Yes.
Yeah, we really do see those, and they really mean so much to us, especially when grappling with all this. Now, it's a really common question, and how I tend to answer it varies day to day. But are there things that give you hope, that give you light, that not just make you think, oh, maybe we could stop this, but maybe we could actually build something beautiful in the process?
Hope is not so much an emotion as it is a practice. So if you wait for hope to show up in today's world, it likely won't. The news is not full of hope. The news is actually designed to make us feel angry, frustrated, sad. That's what actually gets the clicks. But if we practice hope, and practice means actually practicing like a muscle, like a discipline, like going out and looking for reasons to hope, and then thinking about those things, and then sharing the things that we learn, that's where the hope comes from.
And for you, could you give some examples of those things in the world around you that boost that emotion in yourself?
Yes, so I really love climate solutions that are win-win-win-wins. or even win-win-win-win-wins. And so what I mean by that, let me give you a concrete example. So we are actually here in Berlin right now, and one of the projects that the Nature Conservancy is working on in Berlin, and I serve as their chief scientist globally, is in greening areas of Berlin, especially areas that don't have this nice park system like we're in right now, but areas that are much more concrete and buildings. Why is greening an urban area a climate solution? Well, first of all, it turns out that in the same city, low-income neighborhoods can be up to 6 or 7 degrees Celsius warmer than higher-income neighborhoods in the same city during a heat wave.
And that's because of a tree cover and
They
things
don't
like
have
that?
green space. That's why. And so when we green low-income neighborhoods, it actually provides them with the tree cover to keep them cooler, which reduces the impact on their health and their air conditioning if they have it. But green spaces also soak up more water when it floods, and we know that floods and heavy rainfall are getting much worse with climate change. Often low-income neighborhoods are located in areas that flood more easily because those areas are cheaper, and so people don't have to pay as much to live there. Then we know that being outside in nature actually affects our body chemistry. It's good for our mental health and our physical health. But trees also filter air pollution, and again, low-income neighborhoods typically have more air pollution. Trees also take up carbon as they grow, and we know that trees also address many of the inequalities in terms of providing amenities for people in their neighborhood. So how many wins is that? We've got heat, we've got air pollution, we've got flood protection, we've got giving people places to go outdoors that helps their mental and physical health.
Yeah.
We can
I
count
think
those
that counts
twice.
too. Yeah.
Okay. And then they take up carbon too. Those are like 6 wins.
Yeah.
And so that just has to make you smile and feel like, you know what? Climate solutions are not just about fixing what's wrong. Climate solutions could take us to a better world. And that fundamentally is what gives me hope.
And you mentioned this idea of hope as a practice. I think it's not just, for me, a practice of going out into the world and seeing these beautiful things which can help not just the climate, but so many other things. It's earning that hope as well. It's seeing, okay, well, there are people who are willing to, act on this and talk about it and make changes in their own lives. And I'm one of those people. I think, there's this famous quote, which I quote often and always forget who it's from. Action is the antidote to despair.
It's from Joan Baez.
But it's so true to me. And it's so important. And at the very, very least, if you're busy enough, you won't have time to despair. But at the absolute best, you see the beauty in those actions.
I completely agree. And then I would add to that, not only action, but acting together with other people. We can't do this alone. But I am convinced we can do it together. And when we're working together with others, when we're feeling down, there's somebody to help lift us up. When we need a break, there's somebody else to put their hand on the boulder and say, go take a rest. We really need that human community working together because I truly believe that unless we work together, we can't fix this.
And just on a personal note, that's why it means so much when I get to meet people like Katharine. It's obviously lovely to make videos for all of you, but it's also just nice selfishly to meet someone where it's just like, okay, we go through the same things, we're working on the same things, to see those, parallel experiences and feel less lonely because of that. Now, we often spend our lives talking about other people's questions about climate change, other people's uncertainties about climate change. I'm curious to know, what are the questions, the big questions for you that we still have to answer?
So my research focuses on understanding how climate change is going to affect us at the hyper-local level. So I work very hard to develop climate projections, not for entire regions or countries, but for individual cities, individual weather stations that people can use to make real-life decisions about if you're going to be designing bridge infrastructure, or if you're a city and you're planning for the public health system of the city. Knowing
the world's going to be 1.5 degrees hotter, what do you do if you work in a city council with that information?
Very little. But if you know that city has already had a devastating heat wave that had more than 2 weeks over, say, 38 degrees Celsius for 2 weeks, and these were the impacts. And then if you know that climate change is going to make that heat wave 5 times more likely or 10 times more likely, or if you know the same about floods or sea level rise or hurricanes, then you can start to make decisions and build resilience. So for me, that's the question I address. But in terms of the broad area of science, I feel like the biggest question is the fact that we are conducting an unprecedented experiment with our home. As far back as we can go in the history of our planet, we have never seen this much carbon going into the atmosphere this quickly. That is scary. We know that in the past we have had 5 periods of major climatic change, and those 5 periods were called extinctions. Our choices will determine our future, and at a critical time in history when our choices are more important than ever, it's discouraging to see how people are becoming more divided than ever.
Still, though, there are moments in so many different contexts where you see people getting together and surprising you. And for me, one of the big ones, I think, over the last 5 or so years, we've just seen this huge emergence of people standing up and taking to the streets and having their voices heard about climate change. And for us who've worked on climate change much longer than the last half decade, we saw, I suppose, many little movements come and go and just get completely ignored. And it's amazed me to see that people are standing arm in arm and refusing to be ignored.
This is an example of how we often focus, as humans, we tend to focus more on what still needs to be done rather than what has been done. And make no mistake, there's so much more that needs to be done. It's as if we are climbing a mountain taller than Mount Everest that has never been climbed before, and we're climbing it with the entire human race with us. But every once in a while you have to stop and you have to realize, look how far we've come. We've already climbed 800 meters up, and we can already see how far and how much we've achieved. And so, for example, when you think about how many people are now aware of and worried about climate change, that number is far higher today than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. When you look at the costs of solar energy and wind energy, they have plummeted massively than where they were just 10 years ago. Progress is being made. And if we push harder, more will happen.
I think this is so easy to lose sight of. People often ask, are we making progress? The answer is a resounding yes.
Yes.
Are we making enough progress? Unfortunately, the answer is a hell no. But we are taking steps in the right direction, and we need to turn those steps into a sprint. And you mentioned, the decrease in cost in renewables. Just a few years ago, it was the case that when we spoke about the transition to renewables, we'd say things like, how are we going to be able to convince the world to pay for these more expensive forms of energy? Mm-hmm. That's not the case now. In most contexts now, renewables are the cheapest way of getting your electricity, which just, at least when I started working on climate change, and I'd guess for you as well, I could never imagine that happening.
No.
And it's just an amazing position to be in for, amping up our solutions to climate change.
Absolutely. And I never imagined when I moved to Texas 15 years ago that not only would Texas be a leader in wind energy, but it's now the #1 producer of solar energy in the entire United States. So the solutions are all around us, and many people across the spectrum are a part of it.
How do you feel about your role then as someone with a big megaphone talking about climate change? Do you think of it as trying to help people understand the science, trying to get people to be more active in their lives, all of the above? What do you prioritize?
I think the most important thing is action. We could have the whole world worried sick about climate change with 100% accurate understanding of the science, but if they don't know what to do, then it's pointless. So in my mind, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to connect our head, where we know all the information about the world is getting warmer, humans are responsible, the impacts are very serious, to our heart, why it matters to the people and places and things that I love, which my answer is different than somebody else's, and then connecting our heart to our hands. What I as an individual can do in my personal life, but even more importantly, to change the system. And if we can connect our head to our heart to our hands, I think that's where we've got people activated long term.
It would be remiss if we didn't then say, okay, well, what are the things our hands ought to be doing? And I guess also, I'm curious, what are the things you do with your hands when it comes to acting on climate change?
Well, so often we think that the most important thing we can do to fight climate change is also the most important way we can cut our carbon footprint, but it isn't. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously making personal choices to cut our carbon footprint is important, but if we don't change the system, we're not going to fix this problem. And so I know that the most important thing any of us can do to catalyze the social change that we need is to use our voices to advocate for change. How did women get the vote? How were civil rights in the United States enacted? How was apartheid ended in South Africa? None of this happened because the rich and powerful people just woke up one morning.
I think I'll end up.
Yeah, exactly.
This system I've been benefiting.
It's Friday. Let's just end apartheid, or it's Saturday. Let's give women the vote. That didn't happen. It happened because people who were not powerful, who were not wealthy, and many of whom are still not famous today, we only know a few of their names, They understood the power of their voice to call for change. And so each of us has those voices, and that's what young people are showing us today, is their voices are powerful, and ours are too. And when we use our voice as an individual, when we join an organization or a climate action group to magnify or amplify the impact of our voice, when we use our voice with our money, where we bank, where we put our retirement, what type of credit card we use our voice when we vote and when we speak with politicians, we use our voice where we work or where we study. When we use our voice, that is truly how we can change the world.
And I think on that note, Katharine is really someone who uses her voice to enact change in a phenomenal way. You can find her on basically all social media platforms, including here on YouTube, where she's got the fantastic series Global Weirding. The link will be somewhere here. The links to her other social medias will be in the description below. Katharine, thank you so much for talking to me about climate change.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Adam.
Okay, until next time, bye. I'm glad we're doing this outside.
I know, me too.